Every file tells a story. Some end in fame, some end in silence, and some even end in redemption. What you're about to hear was never meant to be forgotten. This is The Dark Files. The following case contains information that may be considered sensitive or disturbing. Certain details have been verified through official record and testimony. Viewer discretion is advised. Before she became one of the defining voices of 90s R&B, Monica Denise Arnold was a teenager from College Park whose confidence, maturity, and talent made people forget how young she truly was. By the time her debut album, Miss Thang, hit the shelves, she wasn't just a rising artist. She was already carrying the reputation of a girl who was grown, ready, and fast, long before she had the chance to learn what childhood was supposed to feel like. The adults around her saw a voice far beyond her age. The industry saw a marketable persona, and the community saw a little black girl who acted older than she was, a label that followed her into every room, every interview, and every stage she stood on. But labels have consequences. When a child is celebrated for acting like an adult, she begins to believe that she is one. And in Monica's case, that possible belief opened the door to relationships, environments, traumas, and expectations that no teenager, no matter how talented or confident, was prepared to navigate. Behind the polished vocals and the success was a girl still learning herself, living in a world that kept rewarding her for being tougher, louder, braver, and more mature than her age required. What looked like early strength was often early pressure, and what looked like attitude was sometimes armor. This file examines how Monica became the face of teenage confidence in 90s R&B, and what it cost her to be praised for a persona that treated her like a grown woman long before she was old enough to be one. Monica Denise Arnold was born on October 24, 1980, in College Park, Georgia, to a musically gifted family that valued faith, discipline, and community. Her mother, Marilyn Best, sang in the church, and her father worked in air freight, providing a structured and steady foundation for Monica and her siblings. Music wasn't just a pastime in the household, it was a natural part of her environment. From a young age, Monica showed an interest in singing. She joined the church choir as a child and was comfortable performing in front of others. Church was her first stage, and it gave her a place to develop confidence, helped her learn how to control her voice, control her sound, project confidence, and stand out without really being told to. She was a natural. She was drawn to powerful vocalists, especially Whitney Houston, whose influence can be heard in Monica's early tone and delivery. Although she was a child, Monica carried herself with a seriousness and determination that adults noticed immediately. She wasn't shy, and she wasn't hesitant. She approached singing with the same intensity as seasoned adults. Music wasn't her only priority. Monica was a disciplined student who took school seriously even before her career began. Teachers and family members noticed she was focused, outspoken, and willing to put effort into whatever she was doing. Her personality was direct and self-assured, qualities that stood out in both school and choir settings. Her parents separated in 1984 and finalized their divorce in 1987, leaving her mother to raise the household as a single parent. Despite the shift, Monica stayed connected to church and music, and she continued developing her voice through structured environments. By age 10, she had already become the youngest member of Charles Thompson and the Majestics, a traveling 12-person gospel choir. She also began entering local talent shows, eventually winning more than 20 competitions during her early teens. Growing up in College Park meant she was surrounded by a mix of church culture, neighborhood structure, and the realities of Atlanta's South Side. She saw different sides of life early on, but Her involvement in church, school, and gospel performance kept her active, focused, and constantly practicing. Her childhood centered on routine, singing, and the early stages of preparation for opportunities she didn't yet know were coming. By the time she reached middle school, Monica's voice had grown strong enough to get the attention of people outside her church community. She had already entered small local competitions and performances, and her confidence on stage was becoming a defining trait. It was clear she was talented, but no one could predict how quickly things would change once she stepped into the right room with the right audience. Her childhood set the foundation. A supportive environment, early musical training, strong influences, and a personality that didn't shrink under pressure. All of these pieces came together at age 11 when a talent show appearance introduced her to someone who would open the door to her music career. Monica's path into the music industry began when she was just 11 years old. In 1991, she entered a major talent show in the Atlanta area, something she had been doing for years, but this time someone important was watching. While she performed Whitney Houston's The Greatest Love of All, Dallas Austin, a well-known music producer in the city, happened to be in the audience and noticed how confident and controlled her voice was for her age. After the show, Austin reached out to her family and invited Monica to come in for studio sessions. Her mother stayed close throughout the process, making sure she was protected while stepping into a professional environment. Monica took it seriously from the beginning. She followed direction well, learned quickly, and carried herself like someone who already understood what recording demanded. At age 12, she officially signed with Rowdy Records, Austin's label. From there, she began working on the songs that would become her debut album. Once Monica began recording, the adults around her had to decide what her sound and image were going to be. She wasn't a bubblegum pop singer, and her voice didn't fit the typical template for young artists. Even at 12, she carried herself with a confidence and directness that felt older. That energy made producers think differently about how to present her. Early on, they noticed she didn't act like a shy preteen. She was outspoken, sure of herself, and had a natural sharpness that came across in the studio. Instead of trying to soften those traits or make her appear younger, the team leaned into them. Her personality became part of her brand, and people around the studio started calling her Miss Thang, a nickname meant to capture how bold and self-assured she was, i.e., grown. That nickname eventually became the title of her debut album. The music she recorded during these sessions reflected the direction the label chose for her. Her songs weren't written for a child audience. They were full adult R&B tracks, the kind typically given to artists in their 20s. At 12 and 13, Monica was singing about relationship conflicts, emotional abandonment, and situations she had never lived. Before You Walk Out of My Life dealt with the fear of someone leaving her. Don't Take It Personal carried the tone and attitude of a grown woman creating boundaries. Why I Love You So Much was a romantic ballad centered on devotion and intimacy with you, and Let's Straighten It Out touched on reconciliation and sensuality, themes that were adult by design. Producers didn't adjust the material to fit her age. They adjusted her image to fit the material. The result was now a 13-year-old young teen recording songs written for adult experiences. She handled the content well vocally, which reinforced the belief among adults that she could manage the adult image that came with it. As her album came together, Monica wasn't being positioned as a child star or teen idol. She was being positioned as a young R&B woman, even though she was still in middle school. This approach shaped how people treated her inside the industry. The attitude, the tone, and the maturity in her voice made adults interact with her as if she were older. The combination of her natural confidence and the way the label crafted her sound contributed to a public perception of someone who seemed ready for responsibilities far beyond her age. By the time she turned 13, she was fully immersed in the process of launching her career, and when Miss Thang was ready to come out, Monica had a full album of adult contemporary R&B songs performed by a girl barely entering her teens, and an image built around boldness, seriousness, and maturity. This would follow her into the next stage of her life, where the album's release introduced her to a national audience that responded to her as if she were already grown. When Miss Thang was released in July of 1995, Monica was only 14 years old, but the album immediately positioned her as one of the strongest young voices in R&B. The sound of the album didn't feel tailored to children or teenagers. It fit right into the adult R&B landscape of the 90s. The themes, the production, and the intensity of her delivery all matched what older artists were recording at the time. Her appearance during this period stood out just as much as her voice. Instead of the usual teen pop styling that many young artists were given, Monica had a sharp, grown aesthetic. She often wore fitted outfits, heavy makeup, hoop earrings, and a signature pixie cut that made her look far older than 13. It was the kind of haircut usually seen on adult black women, what many would now call an auntie cut, and it became part of her early identity, reinforcing the confident, outspoken demeanor she had in real life. Her personality also matched the material she recorded. Monica didn't approach interviews like a nervous teenager. She answered questions directly, held eye contact, and rarely softened her tone to appear more childlike. This contributed to how the public interpreted her. People didn't react to her the way they reacted to child stars. They reacted to her the way they reacted to fully grown women in R&B. The album's singles solidified her presence in the genre. Don't Take It Personal became her breakout hit, climbing to number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 and number 1 on the R&B chart. She followed it with Before You Walk Out of My Life, which also reached number 1 on the R&B chart, making her the youngest artist at that time to earn back-to-back R&B number 1s. Other tracks from the album, like This and Like That, With You and Forever Always, helped round out her early catalog. The sound was mid-tempo, emotional, and relationship-focused, which placed her directly in the same musical territory as adult R&B artists. In the teenage lane of the 90s, Brandy was marketed as a polished and clean-cut girl next door, while Aaliyah leaned into a mysterious and cool vibe, and Monica stood out as the most direct, soulful voice with the most mature presentation. The album eventually went triple platinum, securing her place as one of the leading young artists in R&B. During this period, Monica also recorded For You I Will for the Space Jam soundtrack in 1996. The single became one of the biggest hits of her early career, reaching number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100 and introducing her to an even wider mainstream audience. This era established Monica's musical identity and public presence. As her career grew, she started performing at larger events, appearing in music videos, and doing press runs with full adult schedules. Behind the scenes, she was still balancing school assignments through her private tutor, but her day-to-day life revolved more around her career than the routines of a typical teenager. This period introduced Monica to a world where adults depended on her consistency, her image, and her ability to carry herself with confidence. Those expectations shaped how she moved in the years that followed, especially as her success continued and her personal life became more complicated. By the end of the Miss Thang era, Monica had established herself as a core part of 90s R&B, not as a kid star, but as a young artist placed in the same lane as grown women. The next stage of her life, the years that followed her graduation, would bring even more success and a series of experiences that pushed her deeper into adult spaces, personally, professionally, and tragically. By 1997, Monica had already experienced more success than most adult artists, but she was still committed to her education. With the help of a private tutor and a steady work schedule, she completed her high school requirements early. At 16 years old, she graduated with a 4.0 GPA, finishing a full year ahead of her peers. Her academic achievement rarely gets mentioned compared to her music career, but it showed her discipline and how seriously she took responsibilities outside of entertainment. The year after she graduated, Monica entered the most visible period of her early career. In 1998, she released The Boy Is Mine, a duet with Brandy that became one of the biggest singles of the decade. The collaboration came after years of the industry and the public comparing the two. Both were young, both were successful, and both had established themselves as major voices in R&B. But their images were distinct. Brandy was marketed as the polished, wholesome, and family-friendly good girl, while Monica was presented as confident, bold, and increasingly grown in tone. The rivalry between them wasn't just a fan discussion. It was something the industry used to heighten anticipation for the duet. The concept for The Boy Is Mine was inspired by Michael Jackson and Paul McCartney's The Girl Is Mine, a duet structured as two artists going back and forth over the same love interest. Monica and Brandy's version became the modern R&B update, but with far more intensity and cultural impact. The song took off immediately. The Boy Is Mine spent 13 consecutive weeks at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, earned multi-platinum certification, and became one of the most successful duets in music history. It also won them a Grammy Award, cementing their place at the center of late 90s R&B. This level of visibility came with pressure. Monica was no longer just the standout teenage vocalist from the South. She was now part of a national conversation about young Black women in music, image, competition, and attitude. The public comparisons and behind-the-scenes tension between her and Brandy contributed to a shift in how Monica was perceived and how she carried herself. During this time, Monica began to show a harder edge, something people around her noticed. What had once been interpreted as confidence and directness now came across as a tougher, more reactive attitude. She had several public and private altercations, the most notable being the confrontation with Brandy backstage at the MTV Video Music Awards, where Monica punched her during an argument. It wasn't the only conflict she was involved in. Stories circulated about her getting into fights over relationships and personal disputes in Atlanta. These incidents didn't overshadow her success, but they did shape her image. This was the period where the early pieces of the Goonica persona began forming. And in case you don't know what Goonica is, it's an internet joke about Monica. When people started to notice her being what they considered ratchet or thugged out, they referred to her as a goon and mixed it with her name. So Goonica. Anyway, around this same time, Monica's social circle changed. When she was just 16 years old, rapper Foxy Brown introduced Monica to rapper C Murder. C Murder, born as Corey Miller, was part of No Limit Records, the label founded by his brother, Master P, that dominated late 90s Southern hip-hop. He was 26, 10 years older than Monica. He carried a hardened street image and was already known for his run-ins with the law. His stage name wasn't symbolic. It was connected to the reputation he had in the streets long before national fame. And on top of it, he was married. But none of this stopped the two from getting close. To the public, their pairing was unexpected and seen as quite inappropriate, and it showed that Monica was changing. By this point, she had gotten tattoos that her label made her cover to protect her good girl image. She also wanted to release a more hip-hop leaning album, inspired by Tupac, called All Eyes on Me, but the label blocked it. They only allowed a limited release in Japan because they felt the sound and aesthetic would damage her marketable, positive image. So audiences saw these changes as a decline. They felt she was drifting toward older men with tough reputations and a lifestyle that clashed with the clean R&B persona she started with. Her relationship with C Murder wasn't hidden, they went public, and fans immediately noticed how it reshaped her image. Being linked to an older street-connected rapper with illegal issues reinforced the idea that Monica was leaning deeper into a hood girl identity. People used it to confirm the fast black girl label that had followed her from the start. Even though they had always viewed her as mature for her age, they still believed she was smart enough to avoid the people and environments she was now embracing off stage. Her relationship with Corey took on a new weight when C. Murder was arrested in January 2002 for the fatal shooting of 16-year-old Steve Thomas, a conviction that would eventually lead to a life sentence in 2009 after several retrials and legal battles. Most artists would distance themselves from that kind of case, but Monica didn't. She continued to support him, visit him, and speak positively about him even after the murder conviction. Her loyalty raised eyebrows. Fans noticed that despite the controversy, she remained emotionally attached to him. This connection contributed heavily to the public narrative around Monica in the early 2000s. People weren't just discussing her voice or her success, they were discussing the men she chose and the world she stepped into. Dating C. Murder at 16, an older married man with a violent reputation and a future murder conviction, cemented the idea that Monica was drawn to men with danger attached to them. It shaped how people viewed her choices, her maturity, and the direction her personal life was heading. Her choices in men also set the stage for an even more tragic relationship, and one that would mark one of the darkest, most tragic periods of her life. C. Murder wasn't Monica's only questionable relationship at the time either. Around 1998, reportedly around the same time she was allegedly in a relationship with Corey, she was also in an on-again, off-again relationship with a man named Jarvis Weems. Jarvis wasn't famous, but he was well known in the streets as a drug dealer. But articles, write-ups, and online discussions in fan spaces say that he wasn't just a regular drug dealer, but a drug lord, painting him as someone with serious weight and serious enemies after him. And for Monica, she was very serious about him. He even already had a daughter who she saw as her own, even while being only 19 years old. This was Monica's man, and she loved him very much, even though reportedly he was very abusive to her, and their relationship was allegedly very toxic. But by 2000, things came to a head. At this time, it's reported that Jarvis was extremely depressed, because 2 years prior, he'd lost his brother in a tragic car accident, and he was having a very hard time getting over his death. He and Monica would go to the cemetery to visit his grave site. Quite often, and many nights, Monica would wake up to witness Jarvis talking to himself and his brother's spirit. Around this time, Jarvis, who was also reportedly a drug user, supposedly gave up doing substances and was trying to quit the street life and became a born-again Christian. He was trying to get his life together. But allegedly something else was causing his depression as well as these drastic changes in his life. Allegedly, under the surface, Jarvis was dealing with legal issues of his own. He was reportedly facing growing legal pressure. According to online speculation, people familiar with that time in his life say that police were building a case against him, and he believed arrests were coming soon, that he would be facing heavy charges that would send him to prison for a very long time. Now, I don't know what is true or not true, but whatever caused his depression led to him making a troubling phone call to Monica. On July 18th, 2000, Jarvis Weems called Monica and told him to meet him at the cemetery, as they'd often done many times before. But Monica knew something was different this time because Jarvis said that he wanted to go and be with his brother. Monica rushed to the cemetery and saw Jarvis sitting inside his car. She says he'd locked himself inside and refused to let her in. She says she tried to talk him off the ledge, so to speak, that they'd spoken for at least an hour, and it was her trying to talk him out of harming himself. But after that hour, she says Jarvis rolled the window up, and as she banged on the car window pleading with him, he suddenly pulled out a gun and shot himself in the head. But he didn't die instantly. Monica says that she then ran to her car to get her own gun and shot out his window so that she could get to him. She says she was covered in his blood because of the glass in holding him. Monica was quoted saying, "I continued talking to him. I continued telling him that I loved him, God loved him, and it was going to be okay. When I asked him, did it hurt? He tried to say something back. But I touched him, and I could still feel life in him, and that allowed me not to give up." Because it took paramedics 20 minutes to arrive at the scene, Jarvis did not make it. He died right next to his brother's grave, just as he wanted. Monica was devastated. This was a scene that would haunt her for years, as well as the guilt of believing that maybe she could have done more to stop him, to save him. She did what she could by channeling her hurt in her music and diary, writing about the event, and she also stepped in and helped care for his daughter while she went on hiatus from music. But as devastated as Monica was, she wouldn't be able to grieve in peace. Because to the public, and mainly to Jarvis's mother, things didn't add up about Jarvis's death. Jarvis's mother believed there was some foul play involved and that Monica knew way more than she was letting on. Jarvis's mother, Tyra Weems, had a different theory and was quoted saying this: "I don't believe my son killed himself. I feel Monica knows a lot more than she's admitting. The bullet went in on the right side of his head, but he was left-handed. Why would he use the wrong hand to shoot himself? The cops just took her word for what happened. Now I wish my son had never met her." Now, according to some online discussions and speculations, some believe two different theories when it comes to what his mother said. The first theory they came up with is that Monica shot Jarvis herself. The reason why they say this is because of the alleged abusive relationship they had. Because he was putting hands on her, they believe that Monica, who would have been sitting in the passenger's side, if this theory is true, pulled the gun out and shot him on the right side. This would also answer why she was covered in his blood. They also believe this because Monica made this confusing quote about the aftermath of the shooting. Monica described the scene following her ex-boyfriend's self-inflicted gunshot. She said, "I remember getting in the car, grabbing him and pulling his head to me, and I just felt something cover my left side. That was the side of his head that I realized was open. Just by the grace of God, the bullet didn't come out the other side. One of the officers told me, 'You don't realize where you were standing, that if this bullet would have come out the other side of his head, it would be in you.'" This quote just didn't make sense to many people who read it, and they felt it sounded sketchy. Then the second theory is that people believe that his mother believes that Jarvis was shot and killed by someone else, perhaps a former enemy of his, and that Monica knows who did it but won't snitch. People believe that a thorough investigation wasn't done and that they just took Monica's series of events because she was a celebrity. Either way, the case was closed and remains officially classified as suicide. Monica has never been charged with anything related to his death. But in the court of public opinion, his mother's suspicions and the physical detail about which side of his head was shot became enough to keep the conspiracy alive. And even though this experience left a lasting impact on Monica, people who were already skeptical of her noticed that she'd moved on very fast. In the fall of 2000, only a few months after Jarvis's tragic demise, Monica had gotten into another relationship, and that made people side-eye her. After Jarvis's death, Monica's life changed direction quickly. Within months, she began dating Rodney Rocco Hill Jr., an Atlanta rapper and rising figure in the city's music scene. The shift was noticeable to some fans because of the timing and with just how fast they felt she got over Jarvis and witnessing such a tragic event. But in spite of the criticism, Monica moved forward, and this relationship soon became a long-term part of her life. Rocco wasn't necessarily a street figure with a heavy reputation per se. He was a rapper and industry personality with connections throughout Atlanta's hip-hop network, which allowed him to have that hardcore edge that Monica seemed to love on men, but safe enough that they didn't have to look over their shoulders like her previous relationships. Their relationship developed steadily, and over the next several years, they built a family together. Monica and Rocco welcomed two sons, Rodney Ramon Hill III in 2005 and Romello Montez Hill in 2008. Their relationship had periods of breaking up and getting back together, but they remained connected as co-parents even after separating for good in 2010. As you can see, the start of the new millennium had wreaked hell on Monica, and because her personal life had grown more complicated, her music changed too. It was now 2003, and by the time she released her third album, After the Storm, the public persona people associated with Monica had shifted. Monica had noticeably changed. Her tone was different, her presence was different, and her public persona carried a new intensity. This wasn't the polished teen star from Miss Thang, or the girl sharing a #1 duet with Brandy. What emerged in the early 2000s was something tougher, blunter, more grounded, and less interested in preserving a good girl image. This was a woman with life experience, grief, responsibility, and relationships that shaped how the world saw her. The music reflected everything she had survived. Much of After the Storm came from sessions with Missy Elliott and Timbaland, who pulled Monica into a different musical space. Missy's writing was blunt, direct, and emotional, exactly the language Monica needed to express what she had lived through. The album felt different from her early works. The production was harder, the writing was sharper, and Monica's tone was more grounded and aggressive. This wasn't teenage heartbreak. This was a woman processing betrayal, loss, survival, and adult responsibility. The album's title wasn't symbolic, it was literal. It was her first major release after the emotional storm she had lived through. The standout single from this period was So Gone, produced by Missy Elliott. The song became one of the biggest hits of her career, largely because it sounded like the life she was living. The song wasn't a soft R&B ballad, it was tense, raw, and the first time we heard Monica rapping about putting hands on people. Fans connected to the honesty in her voice. The lyrics about breaking into a man's home, confronting him, fighting other women, and losing control reflected the kind of situations people believed she was actually experiencing. And after being on a long musical hiatus, So Gone became one of the biggest hits of her career. It was top 10 on the Billboard Hot 100, #1 on the R&B hip-hop chart, a heavily rotated music video on BET and MTV, and a cultural staple for early 2000s R&B. For many listeners, So Gone felt like Monica finally speaking from a place of honesty. Not teenage confidence, but actual adult hurt, and they could identify. She released 3 more singles from that album, with the song You Should Have Known Better hitting #19 on the Billboard Hot 100. This era welcomed Monica back as a R&B force, and her new image cemented her new public identity as Goonica, a name that has stuck ever since. After years of industry pressure, public relationships, and personal turmoil, Monica entered a new chapter in 2010 when she married NBA player Shannon Brown. They met while filming the video for Love All Over Me, and for a moment the relationship looked like a clean break from her past. A stable partner, a family structure, and a marriage presented to the public as a fresh start. The two wed quickly, first in a private ceremony and later with a larger celebration. Fans responded to the match with optimism. After everything Monica had lived through, the early fame, the heavy relationships, the grief, and the patterns the public had watched unfold, this marriage looked like a turning point. But the stability didn't last. Over the years, rumors circulated about Brown's infidelity and a possible outside baby. Neither Monica nor Shannon publicly detailed the situation, but by 2019, the marriage had ended. Their divorce was settled quietly, and Monica kept the same pattern she'd carried her entire life. She handled personal pain privately and moved forward professionally. During this entire period, Monica continued releasing music and maintaining her place in R&B. She released several projects, still standing in 2010, which gave her one of the biggest hits of her later career, Love All Over Me, New Life in 2012, and Code Red in 2015. She also expanded her presence beyond music, television appearances, interviews, reality programming, and steady touring kept her in front of the audience that had grown up with her. Her reunion with Brandy, including the Versus performance and later joint touring, reminded people of her impact during the 90s and early 2000s. It also signaled something else. Monica had reached the point in her career where she was no longer defined by the chaos of her youth. She had longevity. She had a catalog. She had grown woman credibility. Today, Monica stands as an example of someone who entered adulthood while the world watched her teenage years play out publicly and sometimes painfully. She survived an industry that rarely protects young black girls, and she did it while carrying a persona that was often misunderstood, exaggerated, or scrutinized. She made it through. She built a family. She built a career. She found stability after decades of instability. But Monica's story also raises a larger uncomfortable question, one that reaches far beyond her music, her relationships, or her marriage. Because for every Monica who finds her way through early exposure, adult expectations, and heavy labels, there are countless black girls who don't. The label fast has followed black girls for generations, shaping how adults treat them, how peers perceive them, and how the world decides if they deserve protection. Monica survived it, but the label itself has harmed more girls than it has ever described. And this is where Monica's story connects to something bigger. Monica's early career brought her a lot of visibility, but it also came with a label that many black girls know too well: fast. People began reading her confidence, voice, and styling as grown. The public treated her like someone older, even though she was still a child, navigating school, studio sessions, and a developing identity at the same time. This reaction isn't unique to her, though. It reflects a larger issue black girls face in everyday life. Black girls are often viewed and treated as older than they are, and that perception changes how adults respond to them, how they're disciplined, how they're protected or not, and how their behavior is interpreted. This issue has a name: adultification bias, and it has been measured. This isn't just a theory, there is data behind it. In 2017, Georgetown Law's Center on Poverty and Inequality ran a major research project titled Girlhood Interrupted: The Erasure of Black Girls' Childhood. And in the study, the goal was simple: to test whether adults subconsciously view black girls as older and less innocent than their peers. Here's what the researchers did. They surveyed large groups of adults, and the participants included teachers, school staff, counselors, police officers, social service workers, parents, and everyday adults. This wasn't a small or biased sample group of people either. These represented the adults who regularly interact with children. The adults were asked to rate girls ages 5 through 14 years of age. They answered neutral questions like, how much protection does this child need? How often does this child need comfort? How mature is this child for her age? How much does this child understand about adult topics? How much supervision does this child require? The adults did not know the purpose of the study and answered as truthfully as they could. The researchers compared scores between black girls and white girls, and the results were consistent across every age group. The sad reality that black girls were seen as older, more mature, less innocent, less in need of protection, more knowledgeable about sex, more independent, and required less nurturing and comfort. And this bias wasn't only for teenagers. This bias appeared as early as 5 years old. A second experiment confirmed the same results. To rule out coincidence, the study was rerun with new participants, and yet still, the findings didn't change. A 2019 Georgetown follow-up study showed the same patterns. Adultification bias hasn't gone away. If anything, it is becoming more visible through discipline statistics and school reports. So what does this type of labeling mean for black girls? Because adults see black girls as older they are, punished more harshly, comforted less, believed less, supervised less, sexualized earlier, blamed more easily, expected to know better at ages when they are still children. For example, black girls are suspended at 6 times the rate of white girls for identical behaviors. Teachers often interpret normal childhood expressions like giving a side eye, confusion, nervousness, frustration as having an attitude or defiance. Black girls are more likely to be disciplined for tone, posture, clothing, or confidence. Adultification doesn't just affect discipline, it affects protection. A girl who is seen as grown is less likely to be believed when she's harmed, less likely to be viewed as a victim, less likely to receive help, patience, or understanding. Black girls are more likely to be punished instead of comforted, questioned instead of believed, and blamed instead of supported. This is the larger context surrounding Monica's early career. Her styling, song choices, and public persona weren't just marketing decisions. They landed on top of an existing societal lens that already sees black girls as older, tougher, and more responsible than they are. The idea of black girls being viewed as grown, fast, or too mature didn't begin in the 1990s, and it didn't begin with Monica. It has a documented history that goes back centuries, rooted in stereotypes created during slavery and carried into modern life. 3 specific caricatures shaped how black girls and women were perceived: Jezebel, Sapphire, and Mammy. Each one played a role in how black childhood has been misunderstood and distorted. I've done a deep dive on this very topic, and you should check that video out here after you watch this one. Anyway, let's look into the 3 archetypes. 1. The Jezebel stereotype. This stereotype casts black women and girls as naturally sexual or seductive, even when they were children. It was used during slavery to justify exploitation. If black girls were seen as knowing, fast, or willing, then adults didn't have to treat them as victims. This stereotype did long-term damage. It created a cultural assumption that black girls understand adult topics early, that they're responsible for the attention they receive, and that their bodies are inherently mature even when they're still children. It's the same logic that fuels comments like, "She knows what she's doing," "She's fast," "She's acting grown." These ideas didn't come from the girls. They came from a long system of adults projecting adult sexuality onto children. 2. The Sapphire stereotype. This stereotype created an image of black girls and women as sassy, loud, sharp-tongued, aggressive, full of attitude, always ready to fight, emotionally strong beyond their years. When a black girl expresses normal childhood emotions, frustration, confidence, confusion, shyness, boundaries, adults often interpret it as attitude, not because she's actually being disrespectful, but because society expects black girls to be tough. This stereotype blends directly into adultification. Once a girl is seen as sassy or mouthy, she's no longer seen as a child. She becomes grown in adults' eyes even when she's 12. Monica's public persona, confident, direct, outspoken, was filtered through this stereotype whether she wanted it or not. 3. The Mammy stereotype. This stereotype painted black women as natural caregivers, strong helpers, and emotionally steady figures who can handle anything. Black girls were often expected to babysit younger siblings, take responsibility early, be strong, avoid crying, stay composed, act older than they feel. This reinforced the idea that black girls don't need protection or nurturing, only discipline. And this would even explain Monica's need to try and save Jarvis from himself in the streets, putting herself in harm's way to protect him. The same instinct showed up years later when she jumped into the crowd to fight a grown man who was hitting someone during her show. The mammy trope doesn't sexualize black girls like Jezebel, but it strips them of softness and childhood in a different way, by making them responsible before they're ready, and it leads them to continue to mule for everyone else for the rest of their lives if they don't recognize the pattern. Why these stereotypes still matter today. Even though these caricatures were created over a century ago, their influence remains. They show up in the way adults interpret black girls' behavior, the way teachers discipline them, the comments people make about their bodies, the assumptions about maturity and responsibility, the reflex to label them as fast, grown, or doing too much. And honestly, a lot of this starts at home. Before adultification was measured in studies or defined in academic terms, black families had their own language for policing girlhood. One of the most common labels was, of course, fast, or more specifically, fast tail girl. This label wasn't usually based on anything sexual. It often attached itself to ordinary behavior. Things as simple as wearing lip gloss, wanting to wear perfume, sitting with legs crossed the wrong way, whatever that is, wearing shorts or tank tops in the summer, having a naturally mature body shape, asking confident questions, walking with posture, dancing at family events, talking back or being outspoken, or liking music with adult themes. And in many cases, the girl didn't have to do anything. Adults projected meaning onto her simply because of how she looked, how she carried herself, or how early she developed physically. This was especially common for black girls with curves at young ages, or girls who were naturally confident or expressive. The label wasn't used to protect girls. It was used to warn them, to keep them aware of how adults, especially men, might perceive them. But instead of addressing the behavior of grown men, the pressure fell on the girl. Instead of saying, men should leave children alone, adults said, don't act fast. The burden shifted to the child, not the adults around her. And in many neighborhoods, a disturbing dynamic became normalized. Grown men showing interest in teenage girls. Everyone remembers the older man pulling up outside the high school, the 20-something hanging around freshmen, the guy with the car who talked to the girls, the adults joking that a man better watch out for her, she gonna be something. These moments were often brushed off as harmless or inevitable instead of predatory. For black girls, the label fast functioned less as a description and more as a warning sign placed on their backs, a signal to watch themselves, to shrink, to be careful, and to avoid drawing attention even when the attention wasn't their fault. This cultural pattern overlaps with the historical stereotypes and the adultification bias shown in research, and for girls in the public eye, the label travels even faster. Monica grew up during a time when this label was not only common, it was automatic. She had confidence, she had presence, she had talent, and her styling gave her a look older than her real age. All of that made her a perfect target for the fast label, even though none of it reflected her intentions or behavior. Her story shows how quickly a black girl can lose her childhood in the eyes of adults, not because she is doing anything wrong, but because of how society interprets her. This label shaped Monica's early public identity, but for many black girls, that label shapes their entire life, affecting how they're disciplined, how they're protected, and what adults expect from them. And some would even say all the hardships that Monica did have in life is because she was fast, and that's how the blame begins. Monica's story isn't about a fast girl. It's about what happens when a black girl is treated like an adult before she ever gets the chance to be one. Her confidence, her voice, and the image built around her made people forget she was still a child. And once that happens, the world stops offering protection and starts offering expectations. Monica had enough support and opportunity to push through the consequences of being seen as grown too early, but most black girls don't. For the girls who aren't famous, the label comes with real costs, harsher discipline, less sympathy, more danger, and adults who blame them instead of helping them. Their childhood gets cut short the moment someone decides they look grown, act grown, or should know better. Monica survived the weight of that perception. Many don't. And that's the part this story exposes. Not her mistakes, not her attitude, but the system that turns little black girls into adults long before their time. Because once the world decides you're grown, it stops protecting you like you're young. And that's the box a lot of black girls never escape. So lurkers, what do you think? Do you think Monica was the stereotype of being fast? Do you think those attributes contributed to the tragedies in her life? Do you think Monica had anything to do with Jarvis's death? Can you personally identify with any of these labels? Let me know down below.